I used to believe that when a man said, "I just want you to be at peace," it meant love. But now I know it's often how control begins. When I met Ethan, everything about him radiated safety. He spoke softly, the kind of man who never raised his voice. He opened doors, remembered birthdays, and left handwritten notes on my nightstand. To anyone looking in, we were the perfect couple, two people who had built a life so polished, so calm, it almost sparkled. But peace can be deceptive. Sometimes it's not serenity, it's silence that someone else has built around you. Ethan had a way of calling it care. He'd remind me to take my vitamins, to drink more water, to rest early because you get headaches when you overwork. He said it so gently that I never questioned it. I thought that's what love looked like, someone watching over every small detail of your life. Until I noticed the way he started watching me. He didn't like the friends I used to meet after work, said they were a bad influence. He asked for my passwords, claiming it was for our transparency. He even managed the groceries, saying he didn't want me to carry heavy bags. Each act looked like devotion, yet somehow I felt smaller every day. I used to think love was a warm blanket. But with Ethan, it felt more like a silk rope, soft, beautiful, and slowly tightening around my throat. One evening, as the rain tapped gently against the windows, Ethan set the table for two. Candlelight flickered across his face, calm and unreadable. He reached for my hand, his voice barely above a whisper. "Seraphine, we don't need children. You're enough for me. I just want you." I smiled, my heart fluttering with gratitude, because who wouldn't want to be loved like that? But deep down, something stirred, a quiet unease I couldn't name. There's a kind of love that doesn't break you suddenly, it erodes you slowly, until one day you realize the silence in your home is no longer peaceful. It's hollow. Back then, I didn't know the truth. I didn't know that behind Ethan's calm eyes hid the blueprint of a man who wanted ownership, not partnership. That night, while the candles burned low and his fingers traced circles on my palm, I thought I was safe. I didn't realize that moment, the tender one everyone dreams of, was the very beginning of everything that would burn. Sometimes, destruction doesn't start with fire. It starts with someone whispering, "You don't have to decide anything. I'll take care of it." And I let him. Because love, when dressed in gentleness, can be the most dangerous disguise of all. Some cages are made of gold. And sometimes, it takes losing everything to see the bars. I'll W. If you've ever mistaken control for care, or silence for peace, stay with me. This story was written for women like us. And don't forget to subscribe, your voice matters here. They say 3 years is when the glow of a marriage begins to fade. For me, it wasn't fading, it was thinning. Like old glass, still clear but fragile enough to shatter with one wrong look. Ethan and I had been trying to have a child. At least, that's what I believed. Month after month, I waited for a heartbeat that never came. He would smile, touch my shoulder, and say, "Don't worry, maybe it's just not our time yet." But time has a way of revealing what love tries to hide. One afternoon, I went to the clinic alone. Ethan had canceled at the last minute, saying something about a meeting. I remember the hallway smelling faintly of disinfectant and lavender. The nurse handed me my file, and something about the way she avoided my eyes made my stomach tighten. There was a section blacked out, a piece of my medical record hidden under thick ink. When I asked about it, she stammered, "It's probably a system error." But errors don't blush. Errors don't tremble when you ask too many questions. That night, I couldn't sleep. Ethan lay beside me, breathing evenly, the rhythm of a man who has nothing to hide or everything. My mind replayed the nurse's expression, her eyes darting away like a child caught in a lie. The next morning, I asked Ethan if we could get a second opinion just to make sure everything was fine. He laughed softly, kissed my forehead, and said, "You worry too much, sweetheart. You're healthy. Maybe we just need a little more time." But something about the way he said "we" sounded wrong, like it belonged to him more than to us. Then came the small absences, business trips that appeared without warning, late calls taken on the balcony, voices lowered. The way he turned his phone face down, as if even the light from the screen could betray him. One night, long after midnight, I woke to the soft buzz of his phone. He was asleep, his hand loose around the device. Curiosity is a dangerous thing, but silence is worse. I reached for it, and there it was, a voicemail. A woman's voice, light and careless, saying, "Thank you for the new apartment, Ethan. It's perfect." The air in the room froze. For a moment, I couldn't tell if it was my heart that stopped or the world. I placed the phone back gently, as though any sudden move would break the illusion that I was still the wife he chose, the woman he wanted. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to his steady breathing beside me, so calm, so ordinary. And for the first time, I felt foreign inside my own body, as if my skin belonged to someone else, as if every choice about my life had been quietly signed away while I was busy believing in love. That night, the mirror cracked, not with sound but with realization. I saw myself, not as a wife, not as a partner, but as a reflection he shaped for convenience. There's a moment when a woman's heart stops asking why and starts whispering, "How could you?" I wasn't ready to say it out loud yet, but I knew. Something in me had shifted, quietly, permanently. Betrayal doesn't always arrive screaming. Sometimes it sits beside you in bed, breathing evenly, while you lie awake, realizing you've become a stranger to yourself. That night I understood some lies don't just hurt. They rearrange the shape of who you are. If you've ever woken up next to someone and felt that sudden silence in your soul, stay with me. This story isn't over. And if you believe truth can still set us free, don't forget to subscribe. I had always believed that truth reveals itself in time. But when you're married to someone like Ethan, truth doesn't surface, it has to be dug up, piece by painful piece. After that night of hearing another woman's voice, I stopped asking questions. Instead, I started watching. People often mistake silence for weakness. But silence, when it hardens, becomes a blade. Weeks later, I reached out to Clara, a former classmate who now worked at the same hospital where I'd had my minor procedure 2 years ago. We hadn't spoken in ages, but when she heard my name, her tone changed, nervous, hesitant. We met in the hospital cafe, the air thick with the scent of coffee and antiseptic. She looked around before sliding a small flash drive across the table. "I shouldn't be doing this," she whispered, "but you deserve to know." Oh, that sentence, "you deserve to know," cut deeper than I expected. I took the drive home, locked myself in Ethan's office, and plugged it into the computer. The screen filled with scanned documents, medical forms, consent waivers, signatures. And there it was. My name, my birth date, my signature. Only, it wasn't my handwriting. The form was clear: tubal ligation performed under general anesthesia. In the box labeled, "Authorized by," I saw his name, Ethan Ward. His signature steady, confident, next to a forged copy of mine. He had signed my body away. For a moment I couldn't breathe. The cursor blinked on the screen like a silent heartbeat. Every act of care suddenly rewrote itself. The vitamins, the checkups, his insistence that I rest. He hadn't been protecting me. He had been managing me. My hands trembled, but I didn't cry. I remember staring at the clock on the wall, the second hand ticking like a metronome of disbelief. Each tick whispered the same thing. He did this to you. There's a kind of grief that doesn't scream. It just settles into your bones, cold and permanent. I printed the document, held it under the light, tracing his signature with my finger. It felt like touching the skin of a stranger. How do you mourn a person who's still alive? How do you look at the man who sits across from you at dinner, knowing he's already buried a part of you without permission? That night, Ethan came home late. His tie loosened, his face tired but calm. He leaned down to kiss my forehead. And for the first time, I didn't close my eyes. I just watched him, the curve of his mouth, the scent of his cologne, the soft hum of a man who believed he'd never be caught. He asked, "You okay, sweetheart?" I nodded. Because what else could I say? That I had just found his signature on the death certificate of my motherhood? When he turned away, I looked at his back and realized something had already died between us, something that no apology could ever resurrect. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark, listening to the steady tick of the clock. It was no longer marking time, it was counting down. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But I learned it's not about the temperature. It's about the silence before you serve it. After I found Ethan's signature, the one that stole my body, I stopped breaking. The grief had dried, and in its place came something sharper, calmer. When pain reaches its limit, it becomes strategy. For weeks, I said nothing. I moved like a ghost inside our house, cooking, smiling, pretending. Ethan mistook my quiet for forgiveness. He didn't know silence can be the sound of a storm gathering. Then I found her. Her name was Amelia Gray, a name that sounded like perfume and deceit. Younger than me, ambitious, radiant in the way women glow when they think they're loved. She lived in a downtown apartment, one that Ethan's company had leased under an investment fund. But the name on the property paper was hers. I went there once, just to see. She stepped out of her car, laughing into her phone, dressed in a silk blouse the color of wine. I remember thinking how familiar that laughter sounded because it used to come from me. That night, I poured myself a glass of whiskey and began to plan. If Ethan could rewrite my life, I could rewrite the ending. I reached out to Amelia through a mutual acquaintance, pretending to be a friend of Ethan's wife. I spoke softly, my voice trembling just enough to sound fragile. I told her Ethan was sick something about his heart, and that he was too proud to tell her. I told her I was trying to help him settle his debts before the business collapsed. Amelia listened, her tone shifting between sympathy and fear. Then she asked, "How much does he owe?" I let the silence stretch. Then I whispered, "Enough to ruin him." She didn't hesitate. Within a week, she wired me the money enough to cover Ethan's debt, as she called it. Enough for me to do what I had to do. I took that money and met with my lawyer. The house we lived in, the one Ethan called our forever home, was under my name. He'd insisted on that years ago, saying it made him feel secure to have me hold it. It was his first mistake. I sold it quietly, cleanly. Every signature, every transaction was legal. I told the realtor that my husband was overseas for work and that I was moving closer to my family. While Ethan spent his nights in Amelia's apartment, whispering the same lies he once told me, I was dismantling his kingdom brick by brick. The day the sale closed, I stood in our empty living room. The walls still held faint marks from where our wedding photos once hung. I touched the pale rectangles, and for the first time, I didn't feel sorrow. Just peace, the kind that comes when a wound finally stops bleeding. I left a single envelope on the kitchen counter, addressed to Ethan. Inside was a copy of the forged consent form he'd signed for my sterilization. And beneath it, one line in my handwriting, "You took away what was mine." I just returned the favor. Then I locked the door, slid the keys through the mail slot, and walked away. When Ethan returned 2 days later, the house was sealed. His accounts frozen. His company under audit, thanks to an anonymous report mine. Amelia called him in tears, screaming about her missing money. And Ethan finally realized the woman he'd thought too gentle to fight back had learned his game and played it better. That night, I checked into a small seaside inn under a new name. The sound of waves replaced the ticking of the clock. For the first time in years, I slept without dreams or guilt. I didn't hate Ethan anymore. Hatred still ties you to the person who hurt you. He had simply let go. Some women burn bridges, others sell them and use the profit to build their own freedom. That day, I didn't destroy Ethan. I simply stopped letting him exist in my story. I moved through the aftermath like a witness to my own past, watching Ethan lunge for control he no longer owned. He filed motions, sent threats, and tried to claw back a house already sold and a narrative already broken. When the internal emails surfaced proof of personal payouts to Amelia from investor funds, the company turned cold, the board turned careful, and the press turned hungry. What followed wasn't a spectacle of rage, but of gravity. Everything he'd stacked too high came down under its own weight. At the end, when someone asked if I felt remorse, I answered with the only truth I owed anyone. I wasn't taking revenge. I was taking back what belonged to me, my truth, my freedom. There is a rhythm to ruin. It rarely arrives as thunder. It accumulates like snow on a quiet roof, until the beam sighs and the rafters bow, and the first soft crack is simply the sound of too much weight meeting time. I learned to listen for that sound, the almost imperceptible shift in pressure, the day after Ethan found the front door sealed and the keys gone. He didn't call me. He called our former realtor, our bank, a lawyer whose job was to tighten knots. I know, because the bank left a courtesy voicemail about suspicious activity on an account that was mine alone, a brief, tidy echo of his panic, dressed in corporate language. I didn't answer. I had stopped explaining myself to men who preferred their questions to my answers. The first letter came 2 days later, certified mail, my maiden name printed in bold above a line that said, "Respond within 10 days." I read it at the small desk in my rented seaside room, a simple place with cotton curtains and an honest floor that creaked only where it must. The letter alleged bad faith transfer, marital waste, unauthorized disposition. It made our years together sound like a ledger. I folded the paper along the crease the sender had given me and set it beneath a smooth stone I'd found near the shore. I didn't feel fear, I felt accuracy. This is what control looks like when it's forced to speak plainly. The second letter was thinner and meaner. It asked for access to my communications, my devices, my locations, during the period in question. I breathed slowly, counting the seconds the way I had learned to count while listening to the hospital clock in Part 3, the same steady tick that had taught me how to sit inside unbearable facts without trying to repaint them. I called my lawyer. She listened. She did not interrupt. When I finished, she exhaled and said, "We'll answer what the law requires, not 1 inch more." It wasn't bravado, it was geometry. You draw the line where it must be, and then you put your body behind it. Ethan went public the way men like him do, not with confession, but with performance. He told a circle of colleagues that I was unstable, that I had reacted impulsively to rumors, that I had liquidated community assets to punish him. The words tried to stick to me the way smoke clings to a coat, but truth has its own weather, and rumor, once it leaves a mouth, forgets who sent it. The emails surfaced on a Wednesday morning, just after 9. I know the time because my phone lit up with a message from Clara, no words, only a link and a single startled period. I hesitated and then tapped. The page was bland. A gray header for an internal employee forum, the kind of sanitized place where birthdays and compliance reminders live side by side. But the thread was a rupture. Screenshots of wire confirmations, expense reimbursements labeled "client hospitality" routed to an address that wasn't a client's, and at the center, Ethan's name authorizing transfers from a discretionary fund that had once been built on the confidence of people who believed him when he said the word fiduciary. I sat the way I had sat in that office chair months ago, when I saw his signature on the form that unstitched my future. Still, breathing, learning not to flinch at the speed of revelation. I didn't post. I didn't share. I didn't have to. Within an hour, the thread had multiplied into whispers with timestamps. By noon, the situation had a meeting. By 2, the board composed of those precise, nearly invisible people who dislike drama because it reminds them that consequences have a temperature requested Ethan's presence without counsel. He arrived 5 minutes late, wearing the same serenity he used to wear to bed, the kind that looks like calm until you notice it has no pulse. There is a particular stillness in rooms where power is beginning to migrate. You can feel it crossing the carpet like weather, the way eyes stop aligning with the man at the head of the table and begin tracking the person who is simply telling the facts. A woman from compliance read the numbers. A man from risk asked where the approvals came from. Someone careful used the phrase pattern and practice. Ethan reached for individualized explanations, the way a drowning swimmer reaches for air fists opening and closing, arguments trying to become oxygen. He said he had discretion. They said he had documentation. He said it was standard. They asked why the standard brought new furniture to a woman's apartment under an asset development pilot. He said, misunderstanding, optics, disproportionate. The words dripped like water from a roof. You should have repaired last spring. I did not watch this in person. I didn't need to. People tell you what a ruin sounds like without meaning to. A former colleague texted me, not to gossip, but because some truths make the mouth ache until it is used for something honest. Are you safe? She wrote first. Then, when I said yes, I'm sorry. He looked to hollow. Hollow is what remains when you've used the walls of your life to conceal the fact that you took the inside out years ago. The audit moved faster than his lawyer did. Numbers are less sentimental than people. They don't try to protect your version of yourself. The discretionary fund became a corridor that led to one door, and behind that door they found Amelia's rent, her renovations, a boutique invoice for a watch he had never worn in my presence. There were dinners filed under prospects, where the only thing being prospected was her attention, and a flight logged as client emergency that landed in a city where the only emergency was desire. It wasn't the affair that undid him, it was the arithmetic. When the board finally spoke in a voice that sounded like policy, it did not say shame. It said separation. It said violation. It said effective immediately and cooperation with regulators. These are the phrases that replace names when a company is pulling your letters off the frosted glass. Ethan did not protest. He nodded with a grace I had once mistaken for backbone. He gathered papers that no longer belonged to him and placed them into a leather briefcase that had always looked to me like a small, dark coffin. Meanwhile, the legal engine he'd started toward me kept churning. Motions filed, hearings scheduled, his counsel insisting that the sale of the house represented irreparable harm to his reputation. The judge wore patience like a well-fit robe. My attorney explained title, dates, the clean chain of approvals, the legal separation of my account from his. Facts don't negotiate, they stand. Outside the courthouse, a weatherboard reporter asked if I had a comment. The camera lens is ruder than the human eye. It crowds. I measured my breath against the ocean I'd learned to sleep beside. I said no. It felt like a full sentence. But a week later, when the civil deposition wound its way to the center of the room and the opposing counsel recited the list house, accounts, transfers, the anonymous complaint about the emails, I understood there was one sentence I did owe, not to them, but to the chamber of echoes inside me where I had once stored apology. I'm not getting back at him, I said, my voice even. I'm getting back to me. It wasn't rhetorical, it was cartography. You draw a map of harm, and then you walk yourself home. The second climax came not with a verdict but with quiet, an agreed order that dismissed his emergency petition, a letter from the board formally accepting his resignation, a bland notice to investors promising stronger governance. The apartment lease in Amelia's name went unpaid and then abruptly covered by a wire that did not come from Ethan. There are always people willing to fill the space where a fallen man used to stand until they realize the floor under that space is cracked. I thought I might feel triumph. I did not. Triumph is a crowd's word. Mine was relief, and even that felt like a careful glass I set down on a table that had held too many heavy things. Sometimes I replay the interior footage I'll never see. Ethan at a kitchen counter where he no longer lives, staring at the envelope I left behind. Ethan in a boardroom, a graph of withdrawals glowing on the wall behind him. Ethan sitting in a car outside a building where a woman once waited at a window and then didn't. I don't do it to keep him alive inside me. I do it the way you test a bruise, a light touch to prove that the tenderness is finally leaving. When someone asked, afterwards somewhere between the courthouse and the parking lot, if I regretted what I'd done, I recognized their face. They weren't one of his colleagues or mine. They were one of those people life turns into witnesses by accident, the ones who gather evidence of how other people survive. I didn't owe them anything, but I owed the girl I had been, the one who believed peace was a synonym for love. I don't regret it, I said, and the words didn't taste bitter. I didn't get revenge. I took back my shared truth and freedom. The interviewer blinked, as if they'd expected fire and found water. I did not elaborate. Explanation is a leash. It pulls you back into rooms you've already left. In the weeks that followed, I returned to the sea between papers and calls, between the clean logic of filings and the messier logic of a heart learning to live inside itself again. I learned the names of clouds. I mended a cardigan I once would have thrown away. I cooked slowly, not because anyone asked me to rest, but because I chose to. Choice returned like circulation to a limb I'd slept on too long. First the pins and needles, then the heat, then the ordinary miracle of movement. I thought of Amelia sometimes, not as a rival but as a mirror with poor lighting. She had believed in the version of Ethan that had once convinced me too, the considerate man with steady hands and a calm voice, the one who commits small dominations in the name of care. I did not seek her out. I did not bury her in my mouth with names. Women deserve their own exits, even if they take the long way round. If she ever looks back, I hope she chooses a different map. There were practical matters to settle, a new lease in my own name, a modest account that belonged only to me, a phone plan disentangled from family. Each small signature felt like a muscle learning itself. I made lists not of what to buy but of what to carry forward. A kettle that sings rather than shrieks, a chair that fits my back, a window that faces morning. And yet, for all the listing, the deepest work was subtraction. I removed the belief that I needed to be understood by the person who hurt me in order to heal. I removed the habit of narrating my choices to avoid being called cold. I removed the apology that women are taught to lace through every act of self-preservation, so that it looks like grace instead of the ordinary right to live. A friend visited once, sitting with me on the small veranda, watching the water put itself back together after each wave. She asked how I felt, the question everyone asks when what they mean is, "Tell me the distance between who you were and who you are." I told her the truth. Quieter. She nodded, not as approval but as comprehension. Quiet is not an absence of sound. It is the clearing away of noise that never belonged to you. The final notice from the court arrived in an envelope that looked like any other. The case number was familiar now, the ordinary ID for extraordinary months. Dismissed, it read. Not because I won, not because he lost, but because the facts assembled themselves into a shape the law recognized. When I set the paper down, it did not feel like the end of a book. It felt like shelving one and turning toward the window. Later that evening, I walked down to the shoreline and let the water come to me. There is a point where the ocean decides how far it wants to belong to land. It steps forward, it steps back, and in that rhythm, you learn the hardest lesson a body can carry. You are not a border to be policed, you are a shore to be met with care. I stood there until the hem of my dress grew heavy, and then dry again, a small proof that change does not always ask permission, it simply happens. There are sentences I will carry with me the rest of my life. Some are medical, some are legal, some are spoken by people in rooms where fluorescent lights make even truth look pale. But the sentence I repeat to myself, on the days when memory tries to embroider the past with softer thread, is the one I first heard at the start of this collapse. You deserve to know. I deserve to know what had been taken. I deserve to decide what to do with that knowledge. And I did. When I look back, I do not see a battle. I see a woman taking off a weight a man insisted was a necklace. I see paperwork that became a path. I see a house that refused to be a shrine. I see a name on a door replaced by a key in my own pocket. I see the smallest victories, the kind that don't make headlines, becoming the architecture of a life I can trust. If there is remorse, it is only for time. The hours I traded for peace that wasn't, the days I starved my instincts to feed his comfort. But remorse, too, has a season. You bury it in a garden that belongs to you, and you water what remains. At the end, in that careful space between question and answer where even the air seems to hold its breath, someone asked me if I felt sorry for him. I considered the word sorry and found it empty, the way a room is empty after the mover has taken not just the furniture, but the nails that once held the frames. I don't, I said, and my voice didn't tremble. I don't hate him either. There was confusion in the face that looked back at me, but not in mine. I had learned that hatred is only another border to patrol at night, and I had run out of landscapes I was willing to guard for men. I turned away, not as refusal, but as closure. The door behind me clicked soft, final, unremarkable. Most endings sound like that, if you're close enough to hear them. Power doesn't vanish, it returns to its owner. And sometimes, the bravest thing a woman can do is nothing theatrical at all. Just refuse to keep living inside someone else's story. I learned there are lies that hurt more than truth, the ones you tell yourself so you can keep living in a house that's already on fire. I did not take revenge. I took back my share truth and freedom. A year has passed. Seasons have changed without asking for my permission. The ocean outside my window has learned my rhythm, the slow inhale of solitude, the long exhale of peace. I live now in a small house by the sea. It isn't much, but it's mine every nail, every chipped tile, every beam that creaks when the wind leans too hard. The salt air slips through the cracks in the window frame, and instead of sealing them, I let it in. The scent of the sea reminds me that life still moves, even after it's been burned to the ground. I spend my mornings shaping clay. My hands, once clenched from anger, now work the soft earth into vessels that hold more than water, they hold stories. I carve the same line into each finished piece. From ashes, I choose to grow again. It's not just a phrase. It's a decision I make every day. There's something holy about clay. You press your fingers into it, and it forgives you instantly. It doesn't argue. It doesn't hold grudges. It takes the imprint of what you give it and becomes stronger when it's burned. I think that's why I love it. It mirrors what I've learned to be. People still ask sometimes about Ethan. The neighbors don't know much, only that he had some trouble at work and moved away. I no longer correct their assumptions. I don't need to. He's a chapter, not the ending. Forgiveness came to me the way morning fog rolls in quietly, uninvited, and impossible to hold. At first I resisted it. I thought forgiving him would mean excusing him. But one afternoon, as I wiped clay dust from my hands, I realized I hadn't thought of his name all day. That's what forgiveness really is. Not a pardon, but an absence, a space where pain used to live. I started writing again. Not about him, not about the marriage or the trial or the silence that used to follow every "I love you." I wrote about the sea, about the way it carries what's broken without asking where it came from. Sometimes I sit by the water and read old journal entries, the ones filled with anger, disbelief, and loss. I don't cry anymore. I underline them in blue ink and write in the margin, "You survived this." One evening, the sun dipped low, painting the water in copper and rose. I watched the waves swallow the light and thought about all the versions of me that had to die for this one to exist. The obedient wife. The woman who waited to be chosen. The woman who mistook silence for peace. They're gone now, but I thank them. Without their mistakes, I would never have learned what it means to belong to myself. I used to imagine freedom as a door flung open, a loud declaration, a final escape. But it isn't. Freedom, I've found, is Keter. It's waking up and realizing no one else owns your choices. It's cooking breakfast without waiting for another set of footsteps. It's breathing in your own company and feeling full. Sometimes, I still dream of the old house, the long hallway, the framed photos, the tick of that cursed clock. But in my dreams, I'm always walking away, barefoot, carrying nothing but a small box of letters and my own pulse. When I wake, I smile. Some ghosts are worth outgrowing. Not long ago, I reopened my journal, the one I'd kept through the wreckage. Its last unfinished line read, "Maybe someday I'll understand why this had to happen." That night, I finally finished the sentence. Because losing everything was how I got myself back. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a victim or a survivor. I felt like something else entirely. Someone new, someone steady. The past doesn't vanish. It lingers like smoke. But smoke, too, fades if you stop feeding the fire. Now, when I look at the horizon, I don't see endings. I see distance open, unclaimed, honest. I see light landing on the surface of the sea, the same way truth finally landed on me. I've walked through love, through betrayal, through silence, and finally, through freedom. There was a time I believed love could fix everything, that if I was patient enough, gentle enough, faithful enough, it would all make sense. But life has a way of teaching you what love is not. Love is not control. Love is not fear disguised as protection. Love is not losing yourself just to be kept. I used to wake up every morning waiting for his voice, his plans, his approval. Now, I wake to the sound of the sea brushing against my window, and the only permission I need is my own. The woman I was, she would have begged for an apology. The woman I am now, she doesn't need one. Because peace doesn't come from someone saying, "I'm sorry." Peace comes from standing in the ruins and saying, "I'm done." Sometimes we must let a version of ourselves die to make room for who we're meant to become. And maybe that's what forgiveness truly is, not pretending the storm never happened, but learning to dance again once the rain has passed. There's a quiet kind of strength in women who rise after being broken. Not the kind that shouts, but the kind that simply keeps going, building, breathing, creating beauty from what once was pain. Like the clay I mold every morning, I too have been pressed, shaped, and burned. But fire does not destroy, it define. If there's something my story can leave behind, it's this. The strongest woman isn't the one who endures everything, but the one who knows when it's time to walk away from what no longer honors her. There will come a day when you look at your reflection and no longer see the hurt. You'll see light, warmth, and the quiet certainty that you made it. you'll realize that losing someone's love isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of your own. So, if you're listening to this tonight, if you're still standing in the middle of your storm, remember, the dawn always waits behind the darkest sky. When the heart breaks, it's not to end you, it's to let the light in. I hope you find your calm. I hope you forgive, without forgetting your worth. And I hope you wake up one morning, sip your coffee by the window, and realize you're finally free. Because in the end, I didn't lose everything. I was simply returned to myself.